All right, welcome and thank you for coming, everyone. The College of Arts and Sciences Office of Undergraduate Studies would like to thank you for joining us. This is our 5th annual Gamecock Teaching Days event. And this year, we're pleased to showcase some of our McCausland Innovation Fund faculty grant awardees, Andy Schumpert and Kristen Hogan. Both are instructional faculty and lab coordinators from the Department of Biological Sciences. Today, Andy will be presenting on behalf of both of them and their active learning activities in online asynchronous courses, Biology 202, which is Infectious Diseases, Human Health and Ethics, and Biology 206, Genetics and Society. So on that note, I'm going to turn it over to Andy.
So thank you so much. All right, so good afternoon. I hope everyone's having a fantastic finish to the spring semester. It's just around the corner. And so today, we really wanted to talk a little bit about some work that me and Dr. Hogan have been doing in our asynchronous online courses over in biology. And so a little bit about some session outcomes for you, and then we'll kind of see where we're headed. So by the end of this session, we should be able to discuss the benefits of using active learning, whether that's face-to-face or online, describe students' perceptions. We did some nice surveys, used a nice little assessment tool to investigate some of these student perceptions and growths there throughout the course, and summarize some pitfalls and what we've learned from these experiences. Is a good way to think about it, what we've learned, and identify some specific topics potentially from your course that may be able to get molded into some asynchronous active learning. And so we'll start off with a little bit of background on just active learning in general, and its tie-in with some equity in higher education, something that we should all be well aware of and sort of striving towards today. And we'll look a little bit at each course, so Biology 202 and 206, and how we've implemented an active learning strategy in an asynchronous online course. And then we'll look at what the students thought, right, and what they perceived, how they learned from this. And then we'll talk about what we've learned, the instructors. And then we'll look a little bit about your class and finish up with some future directions and some discussions. So first of all, what is active learning? In active learning, I feel like it's got quite a few definitions, very loosely based, but Faust and Paulson in '98 basically defined it, in short, anything that students do in a classroom other than just merely passively listening to an instructor's lecture. And so, we saw this and it was like, in a classroom, challenge accepted there. And so all of this too, I wanted to highlight Dr. Riker and Sean Yee over each one of them are deeper positions, and they were the ones that were awarded the McCausland Innovation Fund grant there. And they created a scholarship of teaching and learning community of practice. And so they brought together, I believe it was 8 professional track faculty members for a lesson study in active learning. And so what we're presenting today is kind of the culmination of that and sort of the results for the first iteration of some of this active learning. And so active learning has been around for a while, and it's gotten some data, right? We've collected some data throughout the years to sort of show that active learning is beneficial to our students. And so Freeman et al. In 2014 went through, they did a big meta-analysis, and you can see they define active learning as engaging students in the process of learning through activities or discussions in class, as opposed to, again, just this passive listening to someone. And so they conducted a meta-analysis, and they were looking specifically to see if, things like percentage of students who fail a class would change in just a lecture style versus active learning. And so you can see this kind of shift here They found that students were 1.5 times more likely to fail in courses that were just lecturing versus those that were employing active learning strategies. And so they went further into this and performed some fun statistical analysis. And basically they're showing that, students' exam grades are improved with active learning, and that, students aren't failing as much. So there's a percent decrease in failure rate. And you can kind of see here, they're looking across STEM disciplines in this meta-analysis. And so you can see, there's 2 in geology there by the wide range. But overall, they found that active learning seems to be benefiting our students. And beyond just benefiting our students, Theobald et al. In 2020 actually went so far as to look at this passive versus active learning in the context of, they say, achievement gaps or opportunity gaps there for our students. And so they were quoted here saying active learning reduced achievement gaps and examination scores by 33% and narrowed gaps in passing rates by 45%. So not only is this something that is benefiting our students, it's benefiting all of our students, right? This is something that we can potentially start helping to fight some of these sort of structural inequities that have been, kind of put into place. And so the courses that we implemented this active learning, this online asynchronous active learning with, were 2 courses. As mentioned in the introduction, there's Biology 202, which is infectious diseases, human health, and ethics. And this is a non-major course, so kind of a service course. There's kind of 2 components of this in Carolina Core currently. So it's an SCI and a VSR component. So students potentially can kind of get 2 birds with 1 stone there. And this was kind of designed and created by Dr. Hogan in 2021. It may have been 2020. Pandemic years are all a blur. But there's various majors that take this, and there's interest in not only just biology, but there's this ethics component to it as well. So something that students may or may not be kind of put together. Typically it's ethics, typically it's science, but science and ethics, yay. And then we have Biology 206, which is Genetics and Society. It's also a non-major course, an SEI component in the Carolina Core. There's face-to-face and online versions of this course offered. And I crafted the online version back in 2019 with the help of the CTE, and at the time their 3Ds for online teaching, the design, develop, and deliver, I believe, in a boot camp back in the summer of 2019. And so the students that generally take this class, it's just eat up with nursing majors, lots of nursing majors. And both of these courses as well are offered online as a 6-week course. So they're offered, the first 202 this semester was actually, it started kind of the first week of courses and ended by spring break. And then 206 fired up the week after spring break there. And so what we wanted to do is create some assignments for our students that got them working, right? Got them active in their own places at their own times. And so we wanted to put their knowledge and experience to work, even asynchronously and in an online course. And so the strategy we developed, it's kind of a mixture of a few different things here. But the one that we finally settled on in terms of kind of the most close to being one of these strategies is that it's an inquiry-based learning strategy mixed with some discussion as well. And so traditionally with inquiry-based learning, you typically follow the scientific method or some other process that is very, I wouldn't say rigid, but it's a bit more structured. For us, we're just providing some props, some topics, and we're kind of letting our students go from there. We aren't necessarily holding them too strictly to specific strategies there. Now, we chose this because we really want our students to be working together. So we would basically assign groups for students, and these groups would then be given specific prompts or topics that they would then have to create a specific product for. So for example, in Biology 206, there's so many different topics that are covered, and especially for a non-majors course, I'm always really impressed with the material we cover and just how well the students do in this course. But one of the things that we talk about is the microbiome, and the fact that we're like covered inside and out with various microbes. And so we actually have the students create for 206 a wiki on the microbiome and its impact on human health and disease. And so we kind of give these students these groups, and then within these groups, we're like, hey, here's the topic for this week. Have fun, right? And so some of the products, the first one we wanted to kind of showcase, 202, Dr. Hogan actually used infographics. So instead of creating wikis, instead in 202, they created infographics. So infographics, I feel like these things are everywhere now. From Instagram to even like Science magazine now, you got infographics in the middle of these articles that provides pretty much all the information you need. And so infographic, the big part of this is that it's a visual representation of information that combines texts, images, and graphics, and you want it to be concise, easy to understand, but it's going to typically encompass a specific topic. And so you could see in her 202 class, we had some syphilis infographics there, as well as benevolence. And so in each of these cases, you can kind of see the students work together in a group to create these sort of easy to read and easy to follow infographics about a specific topic. And so the key there too is being that it was all within these groups that they were participating. For 206, we had wiki products or wiki projects, not products. And here we basically provided them with that specific topic and prompt, and then they worked together to create these wikis. And so one nice thing I will say about doing the wiki on Blackboard, after you assign groups and everything, you can actually have the group wiki get sort of populated there, and it tracks everyone's participation. So you can see exactly how many words, how many page saves each group member has contributed. And so what exactly is a wiki? It's kind of a collaborative website, think kind of like Wikipedia, right? It allows users for quick edits. Oftentimes you can add, edit, delete content. And the word wiki actually comes from the Hawaiian word for quick. So it's usually a quick way to grab some sort of information there. And you can kind of see even in these products, kind of different sort of levels and approaches. And we kind of provide the students with a rubric. And that's something too, we're very clear up front on how grading is going to occur and exactly where these points are going to be coming from. But we also want them to be creative. So we tell them, like, hey, if your group prefers to work on a Google site or a Google Doc, you can do that. Just know that, the participation will be kind of monitoring a little closely there. But, we provide them with this rubric and kind of let them go from there. We don't want to hold them back creatively. And so that's one thing too that we wanted to make sure students were well aware up front coming into the course, and it's clearly stated in the syllabus and so many different announcements before day one. I mean, there's a lot of communication there, and we'll see when we get to things that we've learned when they come up again as well. And so we were interested specifically on how the students viewed their learning in our courses. And so we implemented this assessment tool. It's called a Student Assessment of Their Learning Gains, or SOLG. And so this website, you can kind of go in and create specific questions that you can then use for assessing how well your students learn. And so what we did is basically track our students learning. All right, weird pause. But basically what we did, we started surveying our students week 2. So we gave them the first week to kind of get settled in. And then weeks 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, we sent out this survey and kind of tracked how this changed throughout the course of the online class. And so we had a ranking system for the students. 5 was the best, 1 was the worst, and we asked them specific questions. And Dr. Hogan worked along with Dr. Riker there to create some of these questions and get them sort of bundled in for what we were specifically interested in. And so the first thing we asked, how well did your group work together, right, in completing this project? And so this is something that, group projects, I think I hear groaning through the computer, right? Group projects is one of these things that it's kind of a part of life, but it's also something that, you almost have to learn to work with. And that's another component of this as well. And then we ask, how much did the infographic or wiki project help you in your learning and mastery of the assigned topic? Then we wanted to know how much it enhanced the learning of that specific topic, and then how it connected to the real world, right? A lot of these topics that we selected were very interesting. I see Michelle's cringe there. Very interesting in terms of the topic, something that is usually very relevant in terms of what's happening today, right? Whether it's vaccine hesitancy, whether it's rise of autoimmune diseases, different things that students in these courses would find interesting, something that will engage them well. And then the final sort of statement there, the infographic or wiki project allowed me to integrate this topic in the real world application of my assigned topic. And so here's some data for you. So if you're into data, yay. And through these, we kind of color coded everything. So, kind of week 1 through 5 of the survey that was taken. And you can see everything on here is above 4. So remember, 5 is the best it can be. And we've got the sample size numbers as well. I will say all of this that we're showing today is from Biology 202, just because 206 has not yet finished. We hope to analyze some of that data a little bit later after the semester's over. I did kind of take a sneak peek because I'm impatient when it comes to stuff like that. And we see very similar trends so far. So we'll see what the final say-so is. But you can see here, kind of tracking the trends, it's pretty flat, right? There wasn't nearly as much change of these questions that we ask with this specific topic. Honestly, this one surprised me a little bit just because of the emails that I typically get from groups. But this was good. We were really excited because it seemed that everybody appeared to be working relatively well in a group together, and it was consistent throughout the semester. Absolutely, Michelle. Yes, I'm glad it did not taper. As I think one thing too that the 6-week course has going for it is that it's almost easier to stay connected there. And so what about help and mastery? And you can see we kind of have a nice little spike here in week 2. This is a very common trend that we'll see really in all the other questions. We were kind of calling this a motivational phase rather. So we think our students are excited about these topics, and then they're starting to get used to what they're having to do, and then they're really in this case getting excited about making these infographics. So help and mastery, we can see got this nice spike, and then overall a kind of a positive trend there. What about enhanced learning? Again, you see that very common, that spike here. This is up 4.5, looking pretty good. And if you're comparing kind of the start to the end, again, a positive trend. Connecting the real world, this one definitely had the largest spike. And this in particular, I want to go back and kind of check and see which topics we had covered. So week 2 in this specific topic may have just really connected with the students as well. But overall, you can see, the students are kind of loving these infographics and the ability to kind of connect that with the real world. And then finally, to being able to integrate these topics. And again, you kind of see this one's a bit more gradual, but that, again, that kind of motivational phase there. So we were really excited. Overall, the students were very positive in terms of this. We did have this motivational phase that was also kind of interesting in terms of analysis there. We also collected qualitative data. So we asked questions to basically get students' take on it, right? Like, tell me more kind of thing here. And so, we really kind of got into the weeds here. The students overwhelmingly, we haven't gone through all of the data here yet, but overwhelmingly, it was extremely positive, right? Students were really excited, especially in this case for things like vaccines, right? Really relevant, really, kind of happening right now type of connections for the students. And so they were really excited. And we're still analyzing all the data there. So what have we learned from all of this? The first thing that we were kind of, as we approached this, we were sort of concerned about was participation, right? When it comes to group work, we all have been there, right? We all know, whether it's from the student side or the teacher side, you always have different levels of motivation, different levels of working there. And so one thing that I always impart to my groups, I always tell them from the very beginning, and I say it repeatedly via email to students, assume positive intentions. So this is something, I forget who said this to me years ago, but this is something that really, I think, has gone a long way, especially in 206, with all the nursing majors tend to fixate a good bit there. But assuming positive intention, I always tell the students, like, hey, this is an asynchronous online course. There may be a single mother of 4 who's doing this course like after she just finished her shift at the hospital and put the kids to bed. Not everyone can turn around and kind of do everything immediately. And that's some of the beauty of asynchronous coursework here. And so we need our students to buy into this, right? And we tell them specifically, like, hey, we want your experiences to come into this, right? And this is great for, I'm a really big proponent for things like social learning and culturally responsive pedagogy there, and really digging into the students' experiences and bringing them into our course there. So we make sure the students know upfront why we're doing it as well. And so group size is another thing. In the past, I know I've done 3 to 4 groups. 7 to 8 starts to get a little bit too big. You start to see, more students kind of ghosting, if you will, for the group project. So, kind of a happy medium. And I'm sure this would kind of depend too on how large the course is, potentially the topic and some other factors that could probably play a role. And so we always tell our students too that communication is key, right? Make sure that, and so really this trickles down just from us too. We want to communicate to our students up front that, hey, here's how we're going to approach this. Here's how you should be approaching this as well. We want to make sure, and I mean, it's about every group now. Maybe pre-pandemic it wasn't, because I think I did 2 courses before then. Pre-pandemic, I don't think they really formed them as much, but now everyone immediately in the group just forms a group me, and they immediately then start corresponding that way. But we have to make sure too, I tell all the students to make sure you're being flexible, right? I also too like to do a group check-in. So I'll send out messages, correspondence to each group, and like, oh, hey, how's it going? Just wanted to check in, see how the dynamics are, see if you need any resources, anything like that. And this is usually a really good thing. It's really something that I initially thought we'd have more issues than we have. Participation has actually been remarkably well. I was crunching some numbers the other day, and it looks like right now I've got just under 5% of students that are kind of ghosting in terms of kind of their group project participation. And so also too, in terms of doing this, we also wanted to make sure that we're setting very clear expectations, right? So we have it in the syllabus. I announce it day 1, I announce it day 3, and something too that I've kind of been exploring a little bit more for future iterations. I'm thinking that we could even have structured roles, right? Have a designated kind of like group leader for specific weeks, or maybe an editor, someone to go through and look for specific errors or something. Maybe a group reporter or investigator, something to kind of structure this a little bit more for students. And something else that we've learned is to be ready for conflict resolution. This is something that, if I'm being honest, again, I've had to do a lot less of than I initially thought. And there's so many times too that, especially with the nursing majors, oftentimes it's almost they want someone to listen, right? They're frustrated, they want to, so they reach out, and we go back and forth, and it's a-okay typically in the end. But yeah, that sounds frustrating, let's find a solution, is a phrase that gets used a lot with me. And we've kind of got, I've noticed lots of kind of 2 ends of the spectrum here when it comes to these group projects. So we've got the ghosts, the ones that just don't participate. They're doing other aspects of the course. They're completing other assignments that don't have this collaborative approach, but they just aren't participating in the group projects at all. And so usually I'll reach out to them individually. I've reached out to a few students 2 times already. And sometimes it's enough to kind of bump them back on board. Other times it's just a continued, kind of ghost thing there. And then sometimes, and I've run into this particular case this semester, in particular, you almost have some toxic overachievers. I consider I'm probably an overachiever. I'd hope that in a group setting, I'm not a toxic overachiever. But what this means, so for us, for example, the wikis would open on Monday at noon, and they'd basically have until the next Monday at noon to get everything completed and submitted. And so some of these toxic overachievers, will say, will go in and instead of communicating with their group, they'll just complete everything by like Monday at 3 p.m. And like, there's like a whole week basically that they could have been working on it, but they'll already finish it. And then they'll send me an email about how none of their other group members are participating. And so you see a little bit of that. So it's kind of, getting the students to sort of balance things and kind of walk through there. But we found too that in terms of topics, we want to make sure that they're interesting and relevant, something that's going to engage the students and groups really well. And something too that Dr. Hogan wanted me to make sure that this was emphasized, is that this is extremely accessible, right? Like right now, I've got a student in Spain who's working with groups here, students in Colombia, another student is working in New York at an internship, and they're all in the same group together working on these projects that are active learning, that are engaging in ways that they don't typically find or really sometimes expect with asynchronous online courses. But for some future directions for us, there's, here you go, Michelle, here's the jigsaw, right? Maybe there's some way that we could engineer this with asynchronous online. With that, but maybe we could have some students swap groups, all sorts of interesting things that we could potentially move around. Maybe there's some sort of social media tie-in. I know with the infographics, Dr. Hogan's used Instagram and other courses before, and maybe time to spread the good word of biology there. And potentially we could have students select the topics for the course, right? Kind of let them select what's most interesting, most engaging for them, and kind of proceed. And then who knows, maybe there's some potential AI tie-ins with some formative assessments. I feel like everything's AI right now, but yeah. All right, so with that, I'd love to open up the floor for all kinds of discussions, questions, anything you guys may have.